it's Sam. Just wanted to talk with you about the upcoming eclipse on Monday, or actually Tuesday morning, January 4th, 2011, early in the morning, Tuesday morning. It's going to be an excellent and powerful eclipse, actually. A lot of great potential here, and I wanted to just explain some of this stuff to you. Now you see that we're going to have the eclipse at about 20 degrees Sagittarius. And it's going to be in the nakshatra of Purva Ashada, which is actually ruled by a deity called Apis, which is the ocean. And a few things that are really powerful here is the sign Sagittarius. In the Vedic scriptures, it says was blessed by Lord Brahma himself. It's the only time it says something like that, which it's a very, very blessed sign. There's a kind of general rule that says all planets do well in Sagittarius. That's not sort of rule of thumb, but it's kind of it's just a very powerful sign. It's ruled by Jupiter and the masculine nature of Jupiter, and so all the planets are in that sign, at least the ones that are eclipsed, rather, the important ones: Mars, Sun, Moon, and Rahu. So a few things to also mention. Of course, we just had the lunar eclipse on December 21st 2010, and that was, as I've described, one of the most amazing lineups of planets that we've ever had, really, in the history of humanity, with a lunar eclipse happening in the galactic plane near the solstice. It's really never happened, at least in recorded history, because we've only had the sun and moon and Earth lined up with the galactic plane for the last 30 or 40 years. So, and we haven't had an eclipse on the solstice that day. So that was an amazing watershed event. And I mean, for positive or negative, it's always that way. So people, if you're going to say, well, is it going to be good or bad? It's always potentially both. And that means potentially really good. It's a matter of what you do. You know, there's a saying that says you can't change the wind, so change the orientation of your sails and catch the wind to take you in the right direction. So there's a very powerful wind blowing right now, and I mean really powerful. And I mean the power from the source of our zodiac itself, and that's where we just had that eclipse in the nakshatra of Mula last week. On December 21st. Rahu, the north node, and the south node are still in the nakshatra of Mula, which means root system. And remember, I talked a lot about that. Also uprooting things, but also planting seeds that give life, that sprout and go down into the soil to form roots, but also grow upward towards the sky and produce fruit. So that's the Mula Nakshatra, the one before Purva Ashada, which is ruled by Apis, the god of the ocean. Now, of course, what happens when you put a seed in the soil? Well, you need to water it, and that's what Apis is related to, water. Water is also related to food. It's an Ayurvedic concept that anything we can taste contains water, because our primary food is water. We can go, at least a month or two without eating and not die, but we can't go more than a few days without water. Water is the primary food, and what happens is all food gets broken down into some form of water. So water is the thing of life, not just for our body, but just like water feeds just like water and food feed our body and nourish our cells, the water of love feeds our soul. Just like our body won't grow without food, our soul will not grow without love, the water of love. When you give love to something or to someone, it grows, it blossoms, it blooms. When something receives no love, it shrivels and dies, just like if it receives no food. This is the creative power of this nakshatra, of Apis, the deity of the ocean. Now it happens, we're actually talking about an eclipse, which is when Sun, Moon, and Earth come together at the same point. Now this is a partial eclipse. It's actually not a full-on eclipse. The sun's not going to be completely eclipsed. I'm pretty sure it doesn't get a complete full eclipse, but they're still lined up very close in three-dimensional space. And they're happening in the sign of Sagittarius, like I said, which is a very blessed sign. And the reason it's blessed is because it's the active quality of Jupiter, and Jupiter is really the planet that confers blessings. Not only is the sign auspicious, but Jupiter, the ruler, is in Pisces, in his own sign. So this is just fantastic. We have the ruler of the eclipse exalted. Now, one of the things that made a lot of people a little nervous about the eclipse a couple weeks ago was the ruler of the eclipse, Mercury, was retrograde and not in a very friendly sign. He was in Sagittarius, which is not a very friendly sign. The ruler of this eclipse, Jupiter, is in his own sign. He's in Pisces, the sign of the mystic. So this is really an amazing opportunity to bring together our active idealism, which is really what Sagittarius is about. I spoke about this sign a couple weeks ago, but it's related to everything such as, everything from politics and a sense of righteousness in the world to spirituality and a sense of righteousness in our place, with our place in the universe. It's really related to the concept of dharma and wanting to do what's right. That concept of right and wrong comes from Jupiter, and we always aspire toward what's right, the righteousness. And the ruler of Jupiter now is in a place where we can really experience that inner righteousness in our heart, because it's in Pisces, which is the sign of mysticism, which means not just the righteousness of the world, which is more about Sagittarius, but the righteousness with God, with the universe itself, with higher principles. That's what Pisces is. So you'll often see when there's a lot of planets in Sagittarius, for instance, a person, it's very much related to like the legal profession, for instance. It's why most politicians are lawyers. They study law and righteousness, and then they want to be lawmakers or judges. These are all very Jupiterian things, but also very Sagittarian. But then you see people who are like priests, the Brahmin, the teacher, the mystic, the astrologer. You'll see more Jupiter in Pisces. You'll see that kind of sense of righteousness, a higher law than just even man-made law. Beyond just the abstract quality of having all of these blessings with the eclipse happening in Jupiter's sign, we also have what are called Raja Yogas, powerful formations of wealth and sustenance and accomplishment are possible now. Moon-Mars conjunction is what's called a Chandramangala yoga. It's a great yoga for wealth. And just in general, when you get these planets together, anytime you get a concentration of planets in one sign, it's going to give a lot of potential power. Now, there's also the potential power for good or bad. Again, you don't even have to ask the question. There's always the potential for it to be difficult and to be negative because it's a lot of power. If you're getting a lot of the juice, then if you have something negative in you, it's going to maybe trigger some of the negativity. But if you have a lot of righteousness and you have a sense of doing something big and important and powerful, it's also really good for that because Sun and Mars, they're the two planets that really push us forward and say, I don't care if I feel good doing it or not. I want to accomplish this thing because this is the right thing to do. And they're in Sagittarius, and they've been in Sagittarius for several weeks. So I have this eclipse with Sun, Moon, Mars, and Rahu, which makes things big, all concentrated in the sign of Sagittarius, a sense of righteousness and a sense of purpose and dharma. Is an amazing opportunity for you to really align your vision with action. Mars and Sun, you don't need to be an expert in astrology to have someone say that Mars and Sun conjunction is going to push somebody into action. It's going to make them act. It's going to compel them to do something. And it's going to be compelling them to do something based on what they think is right. Sagittarius. And the ruler of Sagittarius, Jupiter, is powerful. And he's very mystical right now, like I said. He's in Pisces, where it's not just things that are right for the world, but things that are right for your soul, for consciousness, for humanity in general. Very big stuff. Now, of course, it also gets us engaged in the world, which we need to do, especially as it relates to a lot of the politics and things that are happening now, and the message and the philosophy that we're paying attention to, because these are also very Jupiterian things. Few other things that I want to highlight that are really important about this eclipse. Excellent. There's an amazing aspect between Jupiter and Venus. They're going to be in exact aspect as the eclipse is happening. Venus will be about 3 degrees and 15 seconds of Scorpio. Jupiter's about 3 degrees and 30 seconds of Pisces. That's an exact trine. Jupiter aspects these trinal signs. Jupiter's now aspecting Cancer and Scorpio, especially at about 3 or 4 degrees, because that's where he is in Pisces. Exact Jupiter-Venus aspect. As Venus goes into Scorpio, it's going to get this blessing from Jupiter. So what does that mean? Well, Venus in Scorpio is very much about intense and passionate, potential like lovemaking or romance or bringing happiness and pleasure into our life. Venus is the part of us that wants to enjoy life, that wants to experience beauty, that wants to give love, receive love, and have life be a beautiful, wonderful thing. Most of our life revolves around Venus. You wake up and you want to eat good food, talk to nice people, have it be pleasant, have people like you, have everything be nice, and not have it be bad. That's all Venus stuff. It's like 99% of our life is how much Venus can I get? And when it goes into Scorpio, now actually Venus has just been in Libra for 3 months. So Venus has been pretty dignified in its own sign. When Venus is powerful, we don't pay too high of a price for that happiness. Like, for instance, when Venus has problems, we either can't experience satisfaction, like through the senses or through other people, we're always criticizing, or we have no maturity with it at all. We're like too extreme, or we get too emotional, or we don't make good choices. And rather than replenishing our energy and feeling rejuvenated by the things we enjoy with our senses and a sense of pleasure, we become drained by it. We become enslaved by it. We become really sort of torn down. There's a song by Iggy Pop called "Cry for Love." This kind of typifies Venus and Scorpio. I was thinking about what song, and in one of the lines in there, he says, "When searching for a meaningful embrace, sometimes my self-respect took second place. Then I cry for love." It's kind of Venus and Scorpio. It's like we're seething with passion on some level. Definitely can be. And very emotionally involved with wanting to get something that helps us go deep into the nature of our passions and pleasure and enjoyment. This process now is going to be blessed by Jupiter, which means this passage of Venus into Scorpio, right when we have the eclipse, Venus and Jupiter are going to be right. Jupiter's going to be saying, I'm going to help you learn this lesson at this time. So this is a remarkable thing because Jupiter is where we learn the higher lessons in life. And it's going to confer a blessing to Venus around the nature of our passions, about how good of choices and decisions we make relative to our senses, and how we can perhaps do better, and how we can be sort of controlled by them, and how we can become, really taken off track. And rather than honor the highest quality of Venus, which is about giving love, yielding, and eventually merging our individual or our desire for individual pleasure with the beauty of the cosmos. So rather than being stuck in that sort of revolving door of our own desires and disappointments, we learn to transmute that into higher and higher levels. The ultimate quality of Venus is devotion. Because once we learn that it's not all about our happiness, that we can compromise with another, then we've learned a great lesson. And then once we learn that lesson, that we can compromise with one person, then we learn it's not all about us anyway, and we learn the secret that the true gateway to bliss and ultimate happiness doesn't really have to do with my personal pleasure at all. It has to do with that part of me that's bigger. And it's a big cycle, because the more we say, I want to get some pleasure for myself, the more we're just reinforcing our limitation, our limited ego. It's like, I want this for me. If I don't get it, I'm unhappy. Or this is doing nothing but reinforcing our separation from spirit. As we learn more maturity, we learn that craving is the problem, not the fact that it's not satisfied. And so we learn to give and open it up. And that's what Jupiter does. He expands things. First, he expands our awareness about the thing, gives us insight and intelligence about it, then uplifts us, gives us great teachings, teachers, and puts us in a situation where we learn. So you might actually even meet someone, a very important teacher that helps you navigate your desires, or maybe that you get involved with in a very passionate way, but you learn a lot about yourself through that exchange. It also could have to do with creativity, music, art, beauty, all Venus themes. So you're about to learn some big lessons about your desire for intensity and passion, beauty, creating love and harmony, and you're going to learn some big lessons about it, and it should be a very wonderful time with Jupiter aspecting Venus going through Scorpio. The other important aspect is Saturn aspecting Mercury. Now, there's also some wide aspects. Saturn's also aspecting Venus and Jupiter, but it's a wider orb. The Saturn-Mercury aspect is very tight, it's within about 4 degrees. Saturn and Mercury are the two planets that are neutral. They're called neutral planets. They have neutrality, and neutrality is really important to learning things. The other planets have a gender charge to them, a gender quality. Mars, the Sun, and Jupiter are the masculine planets that want to do things, want to do good things, do right things, because of course I never do anything that's stupid or that's wrong, not me. I never do things that are dumb or wrong, right? That's the masculine planets. The feminine planets, Moon and Venus, they want good things. I want to be happy, I want to feel good, I want to be comfortable, I want people to like me, and of course there's nothing wrong with that, because we're always supposed to feel good all the time, and we're always supposed to have nice things all the time, right? That's just the way it's supposed to be, right? And that's the nature of those planets. They have a strong bias, even though we do things that are stupid and wrong quite a bit, masculine planets, but it's hard for us to see it. And many times the things we're looking to pull toward us to make us feel good or make us feel happy are things that aren't so good for us, or they're interrupting the work we have to do, or they make us lazy or weak. There's all kinds of things that the gender bias of the planet interrupts. They interrupt things. They also obviously bring a lot of power, because when we need to get something done, it's the masculine planets that do it, and when we need to feel good and feel connected, pay attention to others, it's the feminine planets that do that. So, of course, it's not a judgment, but the way we often navigate, or I should say the planets that help us navigate the bias, the gender bias, is Mercury and Saturn, because they don't have that bias. Mercury takes what comes its way. Whatever comes your way, there's a part of you that whatever comes your way, you can make lemon out of lemonade and actually enjoy it. Think, hey, this is pretty fun. I don't know why I thought this would be such a big deal. This is pretty fun. Let's do this. That's Mercury. Anything Mercury can enjoy. Because Mercury is the part that's curious, that enjoys to play with things, that's in the moment, that can make adjustments. As long as you don't get too locked into the sense of right and wrong, and this is good, this is bad, this doesn't feel good, blah, blah. All that stuff interrupts the Mercury process. But when Mercury's powerful, the person can just adapt much more easily because he doesn't have that bias. Saturn is another one. Not as easy and playful as the Mercury bias, but the Saturn bias teaches us the long-term lessons. Mercury is the flexibility in the moment. Mercury's very in the moment. It's a Rajasic planet in the moment, processing what you're seeing, what you're thinking, your ideas, your speech, all that stuff is Mercury. And that's the neutrality of Mercury in the moment, is to help you adjust and adapt. That's why he has what's called directional strength in the first house. Saturn is more about the neutrality and the power of being neutral about things for a long term. Not in the present, but in the long term. What happens is Saturn, let's say, will go over your natal Venus, let's say, and you're going to see the truth. Beyond your bias, beyond what Venus wants or this one wants, Saturn's going to show it to you. Whether you like to see it or not, you're going to see it. That's the nature of Saturn, is to show it to you beyond the bias so that you'll make do. A good example with Saturn is, let's say someone is a smoker. Let's say they smoke. And you talk to them, you're like, man, you know, that's going to really catch up with you one day. And they're like, oh yeah, I know, but I just can't stop. I just need the cigarettes, and they're just like, they're not paying attention. And then one day, they like get a lung removed. Then they'll often stop, whether they like it or not, you see, because then all that bias toward this idea they have that they can't do it or whatever gets taken away. And sometimes this is how Saturn works in a very harsh way, is to strip away that story we have and just show us, this is the thing. Are you going to learn now? Or do I have to make it even harder for you to look at things with neutrality and just do what's necessary, rather than do what's easy or right in your mind or comforting or all those things. So Mercury and Saturn work that way. And the aspect that they have now with Saturn in Virgo and Mercury in Scorpio, is really going to be helpful for us, and again, this is happening on an eclipse, so it's going to set a paradigm for the next, several months, if not 6 months or so. I haven't researched that so well to really speak with that much authority, but there is definitely a rebound effect and a longevity of the influences that happen on the eclipse. So Saturn and Mercury direct aspect on the eclipse in Virgo and Scorpio is really going to help us face unpleasant things. Because Virgo and Scorpio are both tamasic signs, which are signs of a difficulty, where we need to strengthen a certain part of us that's weak. In just the area I was talking about, things that we, maybe it's mistakes we make where we don't want to admit that we're wrong. That's a masculine problem. Or maybe it's things that are too difficult that are going to make us uncomfortable if we try to do it. That's a problem with the feminine energy, the feminine planets. Mercury and Saturn, again, they just do what needs to be done. Like I say, it might be unpleasant and, to deprive yourself of the pleasure of a cigarette now, but if you lose a lung, you'll probably override that pleasure, because now it's like urgent. You're running out of time. You need to do it now. You need to grow up about that thing, as an example. So Saturn, Mercury aspect here in these two tamasic signs, which are about the willingness to face things and strengthen our insecurities, strengthen our weaknesses through routines, habits, adjustments, that's Virgo, and also facing our emotional fears and weaknesses and stresses and strengthening them, which is Scorpio. So making tangible, practical adjustments around things that are, that kind of freak us out, which is Scorpio. Scorpio is like the sign of things that, it's like the repository of our fears and vulnerabilities, where we need to strengthen them. And so a lot of things happen as a result of not facing them. But this aspect between Saturn and Mercury is going to be really powerful as well. And we'll see this sustained for quite a while. So to recap, this eclipse is happening in Sagittarius. It's a very blessed sign. It's about righteousness. It's about purpose, ideals, philosophies, teachings, and bringing those things into the world now can be very, very fortuitous because of this alignment of forces. Mars, the Sun, Moon, and Rahu. There's a lot of power right now in Sagittarius. It's on the galactic plane, on the galactic core, where we manifest something, where we plant the seeds of something, and then we water those seeds and grow something based on the in this nakshatra where we're having the eclipse. Purva Ashada, Apis, the ocean, is the deity, and actually Venus is the planetary ruler here. So Venus is the planetary ruler of this nakshatra as well. And Venus is getting this beautiful blessing, this trine aspect from Jupiter as it goes into Scorpio, helping shed light on our sort of patterns of consumption, patterns of searching for pleasure and happiness, and the quality of the food we're eating, the quality of the intake, the sensory input, and whether it replenishes us or depletes us. Remember, this quality of the ocean has to do with food, and not just food in our body, but the food of our soul. Big, big stuff during this eclipse to make some positive adjustments in your patterns of consumption, which also relates to Saturn and Mercury, because this Virgo is very much about our habits and doing every little ritual and routine correctly, based on what we know is right. Again, it's ruled by Mercury, which is a very neutral planet. That's why the Saturn in Virgo is actually a really fortuitous transit, because Saturn does well in Mercury signs because of this neutrality. Saturn is aspecting Mercury in Scorpio, which is a sign of emotional fear and compulsion and things like that. So really taking a very sort of detached and cold look at the things we do that we know are wrong, but we do them anyway because, well, we still have time to do it. Well, I'm not in crisis yet. Well, I'll worry about that one day. One day comes, and when the one day comes, it's harder, because the one day is going to come anyway. But it would be nice if when the one day comes, you have a paradigm of good routines and good habits to make it so it's not so devastating, and to make it so that you'll have strategies already in place that'll help you cope with difficulty. And in that case, when when these more challenging times come, you actually really flourish in them. That's the greatness of Saturn. If we've honored the passage of time and handled things with maturity, then when, quote, hardship comes, it's in some ways it's really powerful, because our life gets really simple. You know, when someone is sick, all they want to do is get better. Their life gets really simple at that point. A lot of the complications kind of fall away, and Saturn, the greatness of Saturn, really comes forth. Of course, you don't like to see anybody get sick or anything like that, but this aspect between Saturn and Mercury will really help us get our routines in order as well. So ponder the nature of these things that I've said. These will be in effect for several months, if not 6 months, to the next eclipse in early June. And please leave some comments below and let your friends know about this video if it helped you. So thanks for watching. You take care.